Hello everyone and welcome to a new Lilja and Lou podcast. This episode we will review the last 4 episodes of season 3 from Haven and give opinions about that. We have some interesting news and someone used our audio widget on the site and we have a voicemail question for you along with some questions posted on the Facebook page.
Welcome, welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room.
But we will start off with the news and Under the Dome casting.
Yes, and as we're recording this, it is February the 3rd, and this is the month that the Under the Dome TV series that CBS and Steven Spielberg, Amblin Entertainment are involved with, and they're starting filming this month so that it can start airing in the summer. And the casting news has come fast and furious. So far, we've gotten casting news on 6 characters, and because this is such a large cast, to keep all the characters straight is going to be quite a chore, and one of the challenges for the TV series to establish all these characters as well. Out of the 6 that we've gotten, 2 are pretty big. One is Colin Ford, who will be playing Scarecrow Joe McClatchy, who is one of the computer geniuses from King's novel, and the other casting is Alec Koch, who will be playing Junior Rennie, who is the son of the villain of the piece, you could say, which is, of course, James Big Jim Rennie, the select man who basically sets up his own kingdom within Chester's Mill. So we have some, and I have to say, I really don't know any of these actors, but they are moving ahead. Of course, the big 2 that we're waiting for are who's going to be playing Dale Barbara, and of course James Big Jim Rennie, and those are the 2 most important characters in the story from my perspective. So I'm hoping for some recognizable names in those roles. For me, for Jim Rennie, I know that Terry O'Quinn, who played John Locke on Lost and who just was in the recently canceled series Park Avenue 666 or whatever it was called, I think he would make a great James Rennie. For the Dale Barber character, I'm not really sure, but it has to be somebody likable. So I haven't really come up with any names for that one yet. How about you, Hans? You got any idea about the casting?
No, the ones that has been cast is pretty unknown to me.
Right.
And actually, that's how I like it. You know me, I don't want those famous faces in there.
Yeah.
Stealing the limelight from the characters.
Uh-huh.
So I'm hoping for good known characters to step into this series.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit surprised though that even though we have gotten a lot of, as you say, they are starting filming now, so we should have heard about more.
Mm-hmm. But
I mean, most of them has to be cast now if they're going to start filming.
Yeah, well, I guess they can shoot around what they've cast so far, but sometimes with a tight deadline, timeline like this, the casting news comes very quick. It's not too unusual for somebody to get cast at the last minute and show up to work the very next day. So yeah. I'm sure that they're really trying to make the right choices about, especially the 2 lead characters, or they might just be holding on to that as long as they can, and they want to release it as a special announcement or something like that. But yeah, those are the 2 characters I'm the most curious about the casting. I'm also a little worried about the fact that there's these teenagers in the show, because over the last couple of seasons we've seen other shows like V and right now with Revolution where teenage characters generally don't work that well with audiences. People get really annoyed with teenage characters rather quickly. So that's going to be a very interesting thing to see how they handle in this series. So that's probably my bigger concern rather than casting big name stars. It's just how are the younger cast members going to handle the roles that they're given. Fortunately, none of them are like the prime character, and hopefully they'll avoid the problems that a show like Revolution has been experiencing right now. But exciting. It's a lot of stuff happening.
Yeah, exactly. And will be interesting to see how long this series will go on, if it will be just a 13 episode or if it will be ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine they want to keep it running. I always wonder about how they plan to end this 13 episode run.
Mm-hmm.
And they won't know if it's getting a second season probably before it's aired. So are they going to do an ending, or are they going to leave it open, or something in between? That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, hopefully they craft an ending that will kind of work as a good closing for this 13th episode arc, but also allows some questions to be open that if the show didn't go on, well, it would have been kind of cool to find out what those were, but it won't ruin the enjoyment of this season on its own. And that's a tricky thing to do.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Okay. Next news is also about casting news. The movie Mercy, who is the title of what we know as Emma. I have really no idea why they've changed the title. It's totally frustrating, I think. But maybe they have a good reason, because I hate it when they change the title just for the heck of it. Why would they do that? Anyway, some guy who I really don't know, called Mark Duplass, has signed on. And as from earlier, we have Dylan McDermott, Frances O'Connor, Chandler Riggs, who at least I know from Walking Dead, Jewel Courtney, Shirley Knight, and Chris Browning. So we have quite a cast there as well. This movie has grown, I think, because in the story and in the Twilight Zone episodes, there's just Boy and his grandma, and we have a lot of cast for that here. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do with this movie.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Dylan McDermott. He had a show on for a couple of years, a legal show that was a spin-off of Boston Legal Practice, I believe it was called. And he's a solid actor. So, but again, the movie is going to center around two young boys, and that is always a dicey proposition. So I'll be very interested to see how that turns out.
And my concern with this one is that I think it will be quite different from the story. Both since it's such a big cast and everything. So I think I think it might be really, really bad.
Well, it might be good. It just might not be based or it just might not follow the story that we all know and are interested in seeing fleshed out.
Yeah.
So we'll just have to see how that one plays out. Alrighty, so that's all we have in the movie side of things. Turning to Mr. King's written work. First off, we just wanted to mention that he has posted an essay entitled Guns. And this is in light of the recent tragedy that happened in the States with that school. And Mr. King has put up an essay, really, that is just to promote, whose purpose is to promote discussions about this very important issue in the United States. So check out on Amazon if you're interested in reading that. It's a good starting point, I think, for something that really needs a solution in the States.
Yeah, I agree with you. Next up, King talking exclusively to Entertainment Weekly about Dr. Sleep. We have seen some of this earlier in the magazine, and now they have published it online. And as far as I can see, this is more than which is to me quite strange. It should be the other way around, since people are paying for the magazine. But I'm happy with it. And anyway, here in this piece, he speaks a little bit about Dr. Sleep and how he decided to write it, and a little bit about what we will see. And my immediate reaction to this one is actually frustration, because actually the book is apparently done. So why do we have to wait like 9 months to read it? So come on, give it to us.
Now, patience.
Yeah, I know.
It builds up the anticipation, but
it does.
Yeah, it's a fantastic interview. We really found out some very interesting things about Dr. Sleep, the catalyst for the idea, whether some people might be taking this as a sign that King is running out of ideas, that he's starting to do sequels, which I think if you've been following the last couple of years, answers that question right off the bat, because I mean, the man's writing more output now than he has I think since the 80s, and he's already apparently, as we found out in our last podcast, he's already got another book ready to go for 2014. So I think that this is just a very cool exercise for King to extend one of his more famous stories, of course, which is The Shining, and I'm very curious to see how this is going to play out. And one of the things that we didn't know about, and this might, if you're total spoiler phobe, you might want to skip ahead 30 seconds. One of the things that we find out is that there's a little girl that's involved at the center of the story, which is something that hasn't happened in a King story for quite a while. And some of my favorite stories have kids in them. So I'm really looking forward to this one. It also shows to me that even though Joyland is coming out first, the anticipation is obviously centered, at least in the media, on Doctor Sleep, and because it is a sequel to The Shining. For myself, I think maybe I'm not as frustrated as you were, Hans, because I know that Joyland is coming out in the summer.
Yeah.
And that will tide me over quite nicely until Doctor Sleep comes out.
Yeah, I think it would tide me over as well, but it's frustrating to know that the book is finished and you have to wait 9 months to read it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, as you mentioned, that some people say that King is running out of ideas and so he writes a sequel. In my mind, it must be harder to write a sequel because then you have all this history that you have to take in. While if you do a completely new book, you can write anything you want. So I don't buy the arguments that if you run out of ideas, do a sequel. It might work in the movies, but I don't think it works when it comes to books.
No, and not going to get into the full interview itself, but there are some other spoilers in there or teases of things that could potentially happen. So if you're a big Shining fan and you're looking forward to this book like we all are, I think it's well worth your time to hunt up this interview.
Yeah.
Hans has got it up on his site as for the link, so it's like a 3-4 page interview, so it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, definitely. And last item for today is actually something that will be most appealing to anyone living in Sweden or has a truckload of extra money lying around, buy a ticket to Sweden. This February 14th, I will make an appearance, my first actually, in something called, if you translate it, the Nerd Cafe, and that place in a town called Linköping in Sweden, who they invite people who are really snowed in on a subject, and they asked me if I wanted to come and talk about Stephen King for about an hour and a half, and I said sure, and then I realized, man, how am I going to talk that long? But I've agreed to do it, so on February 14th, at 6 p.m. We'll be there talking, and if anybody has time and can be there, please do it. And please come afterwards and exchange some words. It will be fun to talk to some of you.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yep.
I wish I could be there myself. I wish you the best of luck, and you can see the link and details again on Lilja's site. And is that your bookcase behind you in that picture?
Yep.
Oh, okay. That's got a lot of good stuff in it. Jeez.
Yeah. It is.
Good picture. Very good. So I wish you the best of luck, and we look forward to hearing how it went for you in our next podcast.
It might actually be taped, so it might be possible
online,
cool. But I need you to learn Swedish before you check it out. I think it with subtitles on it.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe somebody do a video clip.
Yeah.
You can translate it. Alrighty. So that is our news for today. Don't worry, we're going to talk about Carrie, but not in the news. That's coming later.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around, pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift. Hello, and we're now going to be talking about the last 4 episodes from season 3 of Haven, and they were called Burned, Last Goodbyes, Reunion, and Thanks for the Memories. And to say that the season really kicked into overdrive in these last 4 episodes would be an understatement. And a lot of big mythology things happened, and it all ended up at the barn, actually. And the last shot is basically the skies falling down on Haven, and the barn's gone, and Duke is by himself. So, Hans, what did you think of the last 4 episodes of Haven?
Well, first, I'm happy that it was solved who the Colorado kid was.
Mm-hmm.
And you were right about Nathan being his father. Predicted that some time ago. So, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yep. And I liked it mostly. I had some trouble with leading up to a barn. I mean, would have expected something more exciting than a barn, maybe. But I don't know. Maybe
you got something against barns?
No, but I don't know. I never imagined it disappeared.
Yeah.
So we talked about Claire earlier, and we hoped that she would have a bigger part in the series and conclusion. But I don't think she had. She was taken over by the Skin Man at some point, but I think she didn't have any purpose in this season. So I didn't like that ending.
Mm-hmm.
And we learned that her Audrey's boss, Howard, he was actually the barn man.
The barn man, yeah. The barn keeper.
Yeah, exactly. The barn keeper. The keeper of the barn.
Yeah.
The stable boy, maybe. who ran the barn. That's okay. I guess we will see that when season 4 returns, since it's been announced that there will be a 4th season.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I can see it, there's only 2 logical things that can happen there. One is that what happens 27 years in the future.
Which sounds too expensive for the show's budget.
Yeah, I agree. But maybe done like flashbacks, maybe, that they are in the 27 years ahead. So most of the season will take place like in present time,
Mm-hmm.
or they will break the rules that the barn only shows up each 27 year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be a big mistake, because that tells me that they have taken the easy way out.
Oh.
So I don't really know how they're gonna solve this.
Yeah, I applaud the show for this season for their mythology. I think has been really interesting. I think what you kind of your frustration that I'm hearing with the barn and all that is that there's nothing for us really to tie it into in terms of other things that we're familiar with. Like if it's not tied into werewolves or vampires or something like that. Or right now there's only like two possible explanations, even though they've kind of ruled one out as either like this is something from extraterrestrial, or Howard told Audrey that she's very human, so she has to be somehow, this has to be an earthbound, some sort of mythology. So I can only think of maybe it's something like she was like one of the Greek gods or something like that. She might be the goddess of love or something, and this is her punishment for something that she did way back when. Maybe she fell in love with a mortal and broke some rules, and that's why this is all started up. So until we learn exactly what started everything up, it's going to be hard for us to guess where the show is going to go.
Yeah.
And I'm curious because they came up with some of these rules, which from a character decision point are kind of cool. Like the only way that Audrey can stay is if she kills somebody that she loved. So one of the last sequences we had at the end was that Nathan was shot several times, even though he stood up at the end and looked pretty healthy. But I thought he was going to be dying, especially since the barn's gone.
Yeah.
He should start feeling all these things. So, did it work that she went away because the meteors were still falling and it looked like Haven was getting pummeled? So I'm a little worried like you that this is going to become, that they're going to paint themselves out of this by some sort of thing like that Annie complained about in Misery, where she was watching a serial and the end of one serial, the car went over the cliff with the hero inside. And then in the next serial, they showed a different scene where he rolled out of the car before it went over the cliffs, and she called that cheating. So I hope they're not going to do something like that.
Yeah, it shows that they fell out of the barn before it disappeared or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So
they have a lot to live up to in season 4 if they're going to keep this series alive.
Yeah, so I applaud them for answering a lot of the questions that they did, but now they've got to deliver the next step. And I hope they're ready to do that.
Yeah, I hope they have a plan.
Some other cool things we found out during the last 4 episodes was that Vince was the leader of the guard.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. That was a nice surprise. Even though I don't know how he kept that secret from Dave all these years, because those two guys are like glue.
Yeah.
So.
And they still doesn't talk. I mean, it was so frustrating that they couldn't tell about the barn and everything. So.
Yeah.
I was ready to strangle them myself.
Yeah. One of the things that didn't work for me, even though I enjoyed her appearances, was Laura Vanderwoord, who played the Colorado Kid's wife, Arla.
Yeah.
She went through all this thing to get back reunited with her husband, and she wanted Audrey to stop the troubles. But if she stopped the troubles, then exactly what happened to her when she went into the barn was going to happen. So it didn't really make any sense.
Yeah. And at first I thought was it she that was the, did they call it
Skinwalker?
Was she the Skinwalker?
Yep.
So okay.
So she was the cop. She was Claire.
Yeah, and then she killed other women to get a face that essentially was her own.
Right.
Yeah. doesn't sound so good.
Well, she lost her skin, right?
Yeah.
That's what her trouble was. She couldn't keep her own skin. She had to live in other people's skin. So any other big mythology items that you wanted to talk about?
No, I think they straighten out most of the things.
Mm.
I'm not so happy about the Colorado Kid being her son, actually.
No?
I don't know why. No, I don't know why really, but I think
because you read the book and you want it to stay a mystery.
Yeah, and I thought it would be some cooler
something cooler
solution to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty lame actually. I wanted something more exciting for him.
Okay. I actually didn't mind that too much. I thought it was a good reveal for the Colorado Kid.
Yeah.
But for me the biggest worry, like you, is that they've painted themselves in this corner, and whatever they do, it has to feel like Stephen King. If you read his book on writing, it has to feel honest.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
cheat. And I don't want them, whatever they're going to do, no matter how crazy it sounds, I don't care, as long as it feels honest and an extension of what they've established. But if they come back and pull like the Annie Walker serial switch scene or something like that, I'm not going to be happy about that. So
No, the barn is gone and they are with it, so they can't come back until 27 years
Well,
later.
unless Nathan dies when the show picks up.
Yeah.
That might be enough to bring her back. But then, how are they going to, if she tries to revive him again?
Yeah.
So I really don't know I don't know how the next season.
He might die and leave the season. Series.
Yeah.
The character.
Geez, I don't know. You think so?
We don't know. He might join Under the Dome instead.
He might.
I don't know. But that would be a solution if he dies, and because if she kills someone she loves, she didn't have to go. And so if he dies, maybe the barn turns around and throws her out and leave with Nathan.
Yeah.
But then the series would lose one of its main.
Well, then I think they would find a trouble to bring him back to life. That's something like that.
Yeah.
So I give them props for that. I have no idea how they're going to get out of this cliffhanger. And I'm very interested to see what they do in the fourth season. So that on that front, the show was quite successful.
Definitely.
All right, so do we want to run through the individual episodes a little bit, or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so up first we had Burned, and that was the one with the little girl who could make people do what she wished them to do, which was it was okay. It wasn't my favorite episode, but we did find out it was kind of funny how she led Duke around, and made him pirate, stuff like that. And we also find out that the guards through Jordan were telling us that if they controlled the girl, they would use the girl to control Nathan, and then in turn they could control Audrey and make sure that she went into the barn. So I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah. It was
an okay story, I think. And I mean, who maybe she was 10 years. What 10-year-old wouldn't want to have everybody do what they say?
Exactly. Yeah, it's reminds me of the old Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
And we did find out in this episode that the bolt gun killer had been Tommy for most of the seasons.
Yeah, but there's also one thing that we learned, that the skinwalker looking like Tommy had survived the boat explosion.
Yeah.
I mean, how did that happen?
Yeah, especially when they show you previously on Haven, when you show the boat blow up, he's clearly on the boat, so it's kind of like...
Yeah. So that's almost an Annie Wilkes ending.
Yeah, exactly.
In the next episode, we had everyone's falling asleep or in a coma.
Last goodbyes.
I think that was quite good story. Something that annoyed me about it was that it took them so long to figure out that since he was in a coma and waking up, everyone else was going into coma.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I figured it out after 5 minutes, but they on and on and on, and finally they found out. So I think they were a little bit too stupid.
Yeah, for me personally, this was my favorite episode of the season. I thought it nicely showed the Will Brady character was basically facing the same dilemma that Audrey's facing this season, that he had to die so everybody else could live. So I really like that. And just as a tidbit, the actor, Nolan North, he voices the character of Nathan Drake, just the Uncharted video game series for the PlayStation 3. He does a lot of other voice work too. Emily Rose does the voice work for one of his main love interests in that game. So I'm sure that she was in some way responsible for getting this actor on into this episode, much like she got Claudia Black in for the other one.
Yeah.
I thought he did a fantastic job. I think he was a very likable character.
Yeah.
And it was a little too on the nose at the end about talking about the sacrifices, but overall, I think this was my favorite episode. And this is when we were starting to get into the part of the season where they were starting to drop these relationships that we didn't care about, like between Nathan and Jordan.
Yeah.
And we started to get the characters talking to each other like real wood. So I think that's when the season really started to turn around, is during these last 4 episodes. And this was one of the reasons why. So even though I loved the actual finale, the last couple of scenes, overall I think this was my favorite episode of the season.
Yeah, I think it went a little bit too easy when it was going back into that coma. I mean, just lay down and bang, it was in a coma. So I don't know. That seemed a little bit too easy, but I don't know how they should have done it otherwise. But I can live with it, but it was a little bit annoying, I think.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that annoyed me...
I'm annoyed today.
Yes, you are. What's going on? The only thing that annoyed me is at the very last scene that we found out that Claire was a skinwalker, because we figured, well, after Tommy, the skinwalker has to take on somebody else that's involved in the action. So, the Claire character was, just the conduit between Nathan and Audrey, who should have been talking to each other all season long anyhow. So then we moved to Reunion, and that's the one with the high school theme for Nathan's and Duke's high school reunion class. And we also learned that Arla believes that the Colorado kid knows how to stop the Troubles. So it was an okay episode. I wasn't blown away by it, but there was some funny stuff. Yeah,
I like to see Duke as a young kid.
Yeah, whoever the cast for that guy did a great job. That was funny.
Yeah, they look quite like, so.
Yep. Yeah,
That was good casting.
yeah, and he had some of the older mannerisms down as well. So yeah, it was okay. It didn't blow me away. It was a fairly solid episode. But the thing that really bothered me in the episode was when Dave and Vince had Arla trapped, and then
Yeah.
Dave grabbed the vase and knocks Vince out. Come on,
Yeah.
seriously? Really, like that just, I don't know, that just seemed out of character for me, for that one brother would turn on the other one like that. And then he says, if you tell me how to avoid the troubles, I'll let you go. I'm going like, really? Like that just seemed rather convenient. So
Yeah. But I was happy that one of them at least got a beating. So
yeah. You want to see both of them take a beating, eh? Well,
yeah,
Vince shot Dave with a trank dart
You
next
gotta take-
episode, or he tried to anyhow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Something what they deserved.
Yeah. So that was all I had on that one. There wasn't a lot in there that really grabbed me that much.
Yeah, I agree.
It was just nice to see, again, just to see Audrey and Nathan talking to each other like they should have been all season.
Yeah. Finally.
Yeah. And then we get the last episode, Thanks for the Memories. And it's interesting to see Arla take Audrey to Howard, who had come out of the barn at the end of the previous episode with the Colorado kid, James Cogan. So that was interesting. And I love the fact that Howard couldn't force Audrey to go in the barn. It had to be her choice. So that just makes for a much more interesting episode when it has to play out like that. So that part of the episode was really well done. And it's funny seeing Vince try to have Dave locked in the trunk. And who does the Edge play again?
Dwight,
trying to tell him to get him out of the trunk and that. And I like the flashback scene with young Vince and Dave and Sarah at the barn. So that trying to blow it up and it didn't work. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I actually thought that Dwight might be involved in the Skinwalker somehow, somewhere.
Well,
but I'm happy that it wasn't, because then he can be in the series in the future as well.
Yeah, at this point they could pretty well tell you anything about Vince and Dave, and you basically just have to take it, right? Because like that reveal that Vince is the leader of the guard. I thought that was kind of like a whoa. I mean, it's cool in a way, but how could he keep Dave from finding out that for so long?
From everyone.
So yeah. So because anytime somebody puts them under the screws, they blab like little school kids. So
yeah. And what did you think about the Arla character? Do you think we needed her?
They could have done those 2 episodes without her, really. But I guess they had to do something with the Skinwalker, since they had the character there all season long. So it was a bit of a parallel, like what Audrey's going through. The fact that the Skinwalker person would do all these things to save someone she loved. So it's kind of the opposite of what Audrey decided to do. Audrey could have been selfish and stayed behind. Yeah, her character really wasn't necessary. But as I said, they were trying to do like a reverse parallel, showing what happens if you're selfish, if you do things for selfish reasons. Whereas Audrey made the decision to do the right thing for the greater good. But yeah, it was cool just for her to find out that Nathan was the father, and though she took it rather well, I thought.
Yeah.
Even though it was her, but she took it rather well.
Yeah.
So that was cool that Nathan was James' father, and that James and Arla and Duke all ended up going into the barn with Audrey as well. So I wonder how that's going to play out.
Yeah.
So we might get a better resolution to the Skinwalker story in season 4, because she could be back.
Yeah.
Because once whoever goes in the barn, they potentially could be revived, right? So those 2 characters might get to have some sort of better resolution than what they had so far at the end of this season.
Yeah, I hope we'll see more of them, because it seems like they were, at least Arla was in there for such a short time.
Yeah.
So I think they need to have her do something more.
Yeah. And the other thing that I didn't like too much is they're doing this triangle again with Duke and Nathan and Audrey. So we're kind of back to where we were at the beginning of the series, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But we know they have both always loved her. So
yeah. but I hope they make the decision which character's going with which character quickly, and let's get on, because I don't want to go through that triangle stuff again.
No, we didn't have to see a fight about who was the dad either. Could have been a little ugly.
Yes, thank God.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Duke could have slept with Sarah, and Nathan could have slept with Sarah, and Duke could have slept with Lucy, and
yeah.
Oh, he did mention that he had a kid somewhere, didn't he?
Yeah.
To that little girl in that one episode. I don't know where that might be a seed for next season. I hope not, but we'll have to see.
Yeah.
So overall, and repeating ourselves from the previous podcasts, I like the mythology aspects of it.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see what exactly this barn represents, and what Audrey is. Is she some sort of like what we would have think like maybe a Greek god or something like that? I don't know, but
I hope she's not.
Yeah, but the other stuff, some of the interpersonal relationship stuff, I thought was unnecessary, cliched, and I think the series would have been better without it. But that's just my personal take on it.
I agree.
Other people like the triangle stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think overall the season was weaker than I would have thought and hoped it would be. But it saved itself something at the ending. So I think it was an okay season, but it wasn't as good as I would be. And I think season 4 has to be really good for the series to survive. And they have to have a good plan on how they are going to take out. They have somewhat painted themselves in a corner.
Yeah, I agree with you. People are going to expect some big answers again next season, and they're going to have to be able to deliver. And if those answers aren't satisfactory, I think a lot of people might tune out at that point. So it will be interesting to see what happens. They really got the mythology stuff going, and the actors have really become comfortable with the characters. I like these characters, which I thought were pretty flat at the beginning of the series. They all kind of become fleshed out, especially the main three. So they have some strengths there. And they just need to capitalize on that and get away from the more stereotype, cliche storytelling and just tell us a story with these three characters as adults and not as some teenage romance stuff.
Yeah, I think they need to stop putting in new characters for just a few episodes or half a season that really doesn't have any bigger meaning to the plot. I think it's go with the characters they have and make that good.
Yeah. Alrighty, so the final thing I can say, though, is I'm very looking forward to season 4. So mission accomplished. I'll definitely be watching to see how they get out of this corner they've painted themselves into.
Yep. And I think I heard something about it premiering this fall. Yeah, sound quite fast, but it's good if it's true. Yep.
That is our episode review for the final 4 episodes of season 3 of The Haven.
Yep.
And now on to Marv's mailbag.
And it's time for the mailbag. And this time we have 3 questions from Facebook. And we have 1 audio question. The first question is from Frederick Dominguez, who writes in, how is the Kennedy book different than his previous works? And what are your thoughts on the upcoming Under the Dome CBS 13-episode series? And there's actually a third question. Any news on Dark Tower movie? Well, Kennedy book is the difference, I think, between that and the other is that in that book, King is writing about something that has happened for real. And even though it's a fictional book, he have some guidelines and some rules that he has to follow to be true to the truth and to what happened. So I think that's the main difference between that book and the others.
Yeah, I agree. It's much more it's obviously a very flight of fancy kind of story, but it's tied in very much to the events around the Kennedy assassination and even more so the life of Lee Harvey Oswald. So King had to do a lot more research, and he had a lot less wiggle room to play with because he had to stick to what happened during Lee Harvey Oswald's life. So from that perspective, it was much more a constrained story for King. And in some ways, I think it actually, because it put those types of restriction on him, I think it made for a tighter story. Even though it's a long book, I think it's just one of his tightest books that he's written in a while.
Yeah, our thoughts Under the Dome is, my thoughts is that it can be good when it comes to special effects. It's a TV series and the story requires quite a lot of special effects. I hope they have the money to do that. And I'm a bit concerned about how they will end this 13-episode run, because in my mind there's no doubt that CBS wants this to be an ongoing series, but they will probably not be greenlighted for second season if they are, until they have recorded the first one. So that's like a recipe for a bad ending for this first season, I think.
Hopefully the showrunners are taking into consideration the potential that this might only end up being a one-season miniseries and have a self-contained story arc that is satisfactory for the viewers. And I have mixed feelings about serialized storytelling on TV. Is always difficult. You're never going to satisfy everyone. I've seen that in recent years. The ending to Lost is probably the best example. I'm just guessing that the number of people that like that ending and the number of people that didn't like it are not that far apart. It's almost, to me, from what I've seen, 50-50.
Yeah.
It depends on what the series is going to stress. Are they going to stress the character stuff? Are they going to try to tack on some sort of mythology or some sort of government conspiracy onto the story of the dome? Because that could change the tone of it quite a bit. I think probably the most disappointing aspect of the book was the dome and what it was and how it was resolved for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So this definitely would be more of a journey kind of story than a destination. So if everybody's hoping for a really cool answer to what causes the dome, and that's the main reason they're watching it, I think you're going to be disappointed. But if you're just watching it to see how civilization breaks down in this kind of Lord of the Flies scenario, then from that perspective, I think it'll be very interesting to see who takes paths of good and who takes paths of dark. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle it. And some ways, if they would come up right off the bat and say, we're doing this as a 2 or 3 season miniseries or series, I think that would help the writers a lot to chart it out better. But like Hans said, I think the intent is to make this run as long as possible, and that inevitably is going to frustrate viewers.
Yeah, I agree. And the last thing Frederick is asking is if there's any news about the Dark Tower movies, and there hasn't been any news about it for quite some time now, and personally I think it won't happen.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's gone it sounds like it's gone back to square one again. I know Ron Howard continues to put on the brave face for the public, but he's moving on to other projects, and this one is kind of sliding off the radar for him and for the studios involved. So, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't look good right now. But some crazy mash-up Western. It's too bad that Western that Daniel Craig was on Cowboys versus Aliens hadn't proved to be a big hit. Because I imagine if that would have been a big hit, then it would have given steam to the move to do a Dark Tower movie. But now that that's kind of petered out and the Westerns are dying out again, it's cyclical. And until they can come up with a way to make it economically, I don't know. Maybe this will be something that ends up being like Netflix has just started up they're doing Arrested Development, a 4th season, and they've just released a brand new original series, House of Cards, starring Kevin Spacey, and you can watch all 13 episodes all at once.
Yeah.
But that might be a venue where a Dark Tower series could end up, but I'm really disappointed because I really like the idea of a movie crossing over to a TV series and back to a movie. Never been done before. Yeah. I understand it. Very risky, but that would have been awesome to see somebody try that. But who knows? Yeah. Maybe Netflix or something like that's where it might find a home.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, that the chance that it will be a disaster is bigger than it will be a success. So I'm leaning almost toward that. I think it's a good thing that it's not being made.
Mm.
I think it's better that they leave it alone.
Okay. And we have a follow-up.
Yeah,
you never know. We have a follow-up Dark Tower question, and this is from Hans von Werth. And he's asking, if there will be a Dark Tower film, what do you think would be the best cameo role for King, apart from his own part in the series? And I already know what King said he would like to do. I'm pretty sure you know what he said also, Hans. Or don't you?
No, I don't think I did.
I can't
remember it.
Okay, he said he would be happy or would love to do the voice of Blaine the Mono.
Yeah, I remember now that you say it. That would be a great part, because if he plays himself, he can't play anyone else, because
not unless he has a lot of makeup or something or special effects.
Yeah, exactly. But he could do the voice, and then he could play himself. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's and I'll go with that answer because I like that answer.
Yeah. I think that's better.
So I'll say Blaine the Mono.
Or if he will play some smaller part, like some dweller or just sits around or something like that. I don't think he should have a big part in this.
No, like he shouldn't play his father or something like Roland's father.
No, and I don't think, I'm not sure he should play himself either.
No.
I'm not sure.
Maybe, he's too old to play himself.
Yeah.
Because that part of the story takes back when he's in his 40s. So I guess they could do it, but no, I think realistically, And it would depend on who they cast as Roland too, because he's supposed to look like King, right? So they would have to. Yeah. I don't know how they would handle that. That's an interesting question, but yeah.
I guess we'll have to ask Ron Howard next time we see him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Next question is from Josh O'Toole. Asks if we remember the story Skybar, and the idea for Joyland sounds very similar. Perhaps Steve is going back to his older material and feels that he can write them better now than what he was able to when he was younger. He says in the afterword to 11/22/63 that he tried to write the book when he was much younger, but it was too big for him at the time. Well, we talked about this, and neither of us could remember Skybar off the top of our heads, so we're gonna look that up till next episode and get back to you on that, Josh. But I sometimes I get the same feeling there that King is looking over his older works and consider if he can write them better now. And he did that with Blaze. He write that, and so I think it's very possible that he going back to older stuff and maybe he doesn't take the old story and rewrite it, but maybe he sense of the idea and turns that into a new story. I think that's something he might do.
Yeah, it sounds like a very possibility that he goes over his older material and says, especially his incomplete stuff, and might repurpose it for a story in present day. But some of the settings are just reusable too. Like Carnivals, obviously, that's a great setting for many different types of horror stories, and he might be doing it as maybe his mind got tweaked too because of the recent passing of Ray Bradbury, who wrote several pieces like Something Wicked This Way Comes, which takes place in a carnival as well. There's probably different factors just beyond using old material as a launchpad for a new idea. So my gut feeling would be that several elements came into Bradbury's passing, because he's used Riding the Bullet also has a carnival setting as well. So It's just something it's just a good starting point for a story sometimes as well. And we'll follow up on Skybar, because that's a very interesting. We both don't really know much about that story.
Yeah, and we haven't heard much about Joyland either, so even though the short description that we have sounds like something that Skybar, it might be a totally different story when we read the final book. So.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, and so then our last question is our first audio question, and we want to thank Bryant Burnett on 2 counts. One, for using the SpeakPipe widget that Hans has set up on the podcast page at his website, and secondly, for keeping our Carrie discussion going in each podcast. Our streak stays alive. So we're going to listen to his audio question, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about his question, or his response to our topic that we talked about on a previous podcast as to why we think Carrie was moved from March release date to October.
Hi guys, this is Bryant Burnett from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I am sending you a message because I wanted to give you some thoughts on the potential reason, at least, why Carrie might have been pushed back from March to October. It's got to do with the Paranormal Activity movies, I think. Here's my rationale for saying that. Those movies have been coming out for the past, there's 4 of them now, and they've come out one a year, so for the past 4 years, in October every year. And they've been pretty big hits, and because of that, they've more or less had a stranglehold on October as far as horror movies go, because no other studios have really wanted to compete with them. Looking at the box office figures, which I'm getting from the excellent site boxofficemojo.com, here's what they look like. The first one made $108 million. The second one made $85 million. The third one made $104 million. The fourth one, however, which was this past year, that one only made $53 million. Now that's still a pretty good number for a horror film, but it's a massive drop compared to the third one and even to the first one. Now, here's my theory. I think that means that Sony being the studio that's releasing Carrie, I think they looked at those numbers and kind of smelled blood in the water and said, okay, so there's a Paranormal Activity 5 scheduled for October 25th, 2013, but if it drops in popularity the way the fourth one did, then it's really not going to be a huge factor at the box office. That means that there is room for some other movie to come in and take away all the money from the people that want to go see a scary movie around Halloween. That movie, I think from Sony's point of view, might as well be Carrie. March made a certain amount of sense because of the fact that the movie's got a prom theme, and March is when high schoolers are thinking about going to prom, so I think they were thinking they could exploit that. But I think maybe they think now that October is better. And I would tend to agree with them. There's also, and I think you guys pointed this out, possibility that Oscar nominations could happen. It happened for the first Carrie, so why not this one? So that may be part of their thinking as well. But I think it's mostly got to do with the fact that all of a sudden October doesn't look as locked down as far as horror movies go box office-wise. That's just speculation on my part, but I think it's fairly solid speculation, and either way, I'm curious to see how it turns out. Dying to see the movie. I wish I was getting to see it in March, but if it means that Sony has faith in it, that must mean that they think they've got a big hit on their hands. And if that's the case, I'm happy to wait till October. Anyways, love the podcast. Keep up the great work.
Yes, and we thank Brian for that comment, and I must confess that I never have thought about this myself, but it sounds perfectly logical, I think.
Yes.
And it might very well be the reason.
Yes. In our conversations about the timing of movies and things like this, I rarely take a hard look at the business perspective of things. And I think we were both guilty about being more for the artistic reasons of why they were moving it. And Brian, I think your read is very, very accurate and much more important than the factors that we were listing, because movies are a business. And I'm sure Sony's mapping out the landscape during every month and looking at if there's opportunities. I still think elements of what we said in our previous podcast about maybe they really like what they got and they want to move it later in the year because there might be some chance for Oscar buzz, where if they play it in March, people will forget about it by that time. The nominations roll around. But your point about Paranormal franchise returning less money on its investment each time through is very important to deciding where to put a movie. I've run through the several sites to see what movies are being released over that October time period, and it's pretty quiet. I mean, there's a couple of horror movies. October the 11th, there's one called Devil's Rapture and another one called Haunts. I'm not seeing very much about them in terms of buzz. Carrie is being scheduled for October 18th now, and interestingly enough, another horror movie is also being released that weekend. It's called The Seventh Son, which is kind of like, it's got a biblical overtone to it, apocalyptic type of story. If you ever seen, I think Demi Moore did one like this too, the Seventh Son as well, or the Seventh Sign or something like that. And then Paranormal 5 is being released October 25th, the week after. So, and I don't know what other big movies are being released during that month, but I didn't really see any. The only other thing that's being released that's kind of big that month would be October 25th is The World's End, which will star Simon Pegg and is directed by Edgar Wright, and I believe it's Nick Frost. He's also in this. This is their third movie in their Ice Cream trilogy. The other two were Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, and The World's End is apocalyptic movie. So that might eat into Carrie's box office in the second week. We'll have to see. But if right now looking at what I could find for October, I think the movie that has the biggest chance of taking any buzz away from Carrie would be The World's End. But that is a geeky genre. There's only a certain type of audience that's going to go to that. Simon Pegg is big in the geek world, but with the general population, he's still not a big name star.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing I didn't think about that Brian is mentioning is the fact that the studio is planning by what they think they can earn on the movie.
Yeah. As
you say, we had totally different angles when we discussed this earlier. I think he has a great point. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's one other movie I forgot to mention. October 4th, the second Sin City movie is going to be opening, so that could have some potential impact. But that's 2 weeks before Carrie would open, so most of its earnings would have been in the first 2 weeks anyhow. So overall, looking at what's slotted right now for October, Carrie still is, from my perspective, admittedly a biased one. It still looks to me like number one, number two most anticipated movie for that month. So. Hopefully that will turn out. And like you, Bryant, I would love to have the movie in March, but it's turned out that they're holding it back because it's better than they thought it was going to be. That's even better. So I'm willing to wait those extra months because we'll be busy reading Joyland and Dr. Sleep.
Yeah, we're back to this something finished, but they don't showing up to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
again.
And also, in February and March, we've got Joe Hill's got his next book coming out, Nosferatu, and Owen King has his next book out, which he's not really a horror writer. Well, he's not a horror writer at all so far. It's not his area of interest, but it's called Double Feature. And from the description, it looks like a very interesting book as well. So there's a lot of King content coming out this year. So I think we'll all be able to keep pretty busy. And we'll be watching Under the Dome during the summer. So
Yeah, and the Ghost Brothers pack is being released in March.
Ghost Brothers pack, yeah. So lots of King stuff coming out this year, Stephen or other related. So it's going to be a good year. It's going to be a busy year,
and
which is good for our podcast.
Yeah, we have this podcast. I was just about to say.
So he's keeping us going, which is awesome. Alrighty, so that's it for the questions. Thank you very much. And please, everyone, don't be afraid to send in questions, whether it's on Facebook. Follow our Lilja Lou podcast tweet feed. I'm putting up reminders about putting questions or using the speak pipe widget. We love to get feedback and questions from you guys, so please send them in.
It's very interesting to hear your voice, so keep them coming.
So there you go, folks. Another installment of the Lilja and Lou podcast. And we want to thank you all for listening. I hope you're continuing to enjoy our podcasts. For our next installment, we're still coming up with ideas as to what we want to do. So if you have anything that you really want covered as a topic or a review, please either respond over at the website where this will be posted or on Lilja's Facebook page, or check us out on Twitter at the Lilja Lou podcast feed and put your suggestions up there, and we'll do our best to get them into the show. So until next show, Hans, take everyone out.
Stay safe, but stay scared. We'll give you one of our rare air. Sorry.
That's okay. Just do that last part again.
What's it called? Voicemail question.
Yeah.
Not airmail question.
Airmail. That's a good one. I like that. On air mail. Yeah. Audio.